Hey, welcome back to another video with your host, Rising Oblivion. Today, guys, we're going to be talking about how Persona 5 has changed JRPGs, sort of changed the industry. Yes, now, I know every Japanese game is compared to Persona 5, but that's not what this video is about. I know it was kind of whack when P5 was trending when SMT5 came out. I mean, that wasn't very cool when that happened, but the thing is, we can't really deny the impact that Persona 5 has had on the gaming industry, especially when it comes to JRPGs. I mean, Persona 5 has done a lot for JRPGs. Some things good, and yeah, some things are bad, but today's video is going to focus on what it has done to help JRPGs and how it has helped set a, I guess, certain standard when it comes to JRPGs and just games, I guess, in general. And now, there kind of is two perspectives to this, and this is going to be, you know, the casual fans, what it's done, and what's also done for the more hardcore fans, and also, I guess you could say, the Meg 10 fans. So, there's sort of three demographics, I guess you could say, like the hardcore JRPG people, the casual people who just play any game, and then the, you know, more hardcore Meg 10 people. But let's just go ahead and jump on into this. So, first things first, P5 has had a lot when it comes to looks and aesthetics of JRPGs, and just video games in general. I mean, I'd say Persona 5 is one of the biggest turn-based JRPGs to actually hit the casual fan base, which is why I think it has gotten so big over time. I mean, P5 does show a appeal to more steady Meg 10 fan base. Like, it is, you know, something that they could also pick up, but it also appeals to the more casual fans as well. I mean, I'd say only Final Fantasy, maybe Dragon Quest or something like that, has really been up there with P5 when it comes to, you know, actually hitting the casual fan base pretty hard. For JRPGs I'm talking about here, but I mean, Final Fantasy hasn't done a lot lately, and Dragon Quest really has only had, you know, the one game they've had that they've kept releasing over and over and over again. So P5 kind of is one of the biggest contenders when it comes to a JRPG, and of course, not even all the Final Fantasy games are turn-based. So definitely when it comes to a turn-based JRPG, it has got to be, you know, if not one of the biggest, if not the biggest, because of its aesthetics and just how it looks and how it plays. And I do think it's a little bit important to appeal to the casual fans, but not just solely to the casual fans, because then the game can end up being kind of bad. But, so, yeah, I mean, yes, the game has to look well for the graphics and whatnot. Even it being a PS3 era game, technically, and ported over to, you know, next-gen PS4, it takes more than just graphics and aesthetics to make a great looking game. I mean, the gameplay, most importantly, has to be fun and engaging. If not, you're never going to play it. Something that looks good but sucks when it plays is kind of, you know, shooting itself in the own foot. This is exactly what Persona 5 does, though. Not shooting itself in the foot, but having good gameplay and also looking aesthetically nice at the same time. I mean, the way you get into battles is very fast and easy. Other JRPGs like Pokemon and other turn-based games like Final Fantasy, some of the older ones, they take a decent amount of time for even small fights to finish. They're very repetitive and sometimes not even very rewarding. I mean, I think P5 does a good job at making, you know, fast-paced battle. You get the rewards you want. It feels good doing that. And even the smaller battles where you don't get a lot, they're just quick and easy. And especially if you get that Ryuji thing in Persona 5 Royal, where you just run into the enemy, man, it ends super, super fast and is really easy to get, you know, through smaller fights like that, which I think is good. I mean, JRPGs need to have that. I mean, it's all about the sort of risk-reward, you know, sort of engagement, and it's not fun if you're doing a bunch of small battles and you're getting hardly anything for it. I mean, P5 even has Joker sometimes grapple straight to the enemy and lets you attack first, and you can finish the battle in literally one round if, you know, you're good enough and you play the game enough. I mean, the battle gameplay also allows for a fast-paced and streamlined way to fight enemies, and I think this is, for the most part, why in P5 the characters are actually lined up next to each other instead of it being in a circle like some past Persona titles. I think some of the original ones sort of have the same, like, line, but P4 and, like, P3, you know, sometimes you're actually around the characters, you're around the enemies, not, like, in the line, which the line, I think, makes it a little bit easier to kind of understand what's happening there, and it gives you a good visual towards, like, what the battle is doing here. And I mean, getting each character in the battle in line and place, I mean, you could do a whole lot of stuff, especially when it comes to combos, and I think this helps for the casual fans and the hardcore fans, like the Meg 10 fans as well, because not only is it easy to understand what's happening here, but you can also set up a lot of stuff as well with your buffs, debuffs, almighty skills, and more. I mean, the casual player has an easy time fighting and learning about the game, while the hardcore players can learn how to finish enemies all in one go, deal buffs, debuffs, have ultimate skills, and your techniques are always going to become better and better in the future, and that's what makes things fun. I think anybody can pick it up, anybody can play that, and I think it's a good precedent that Persona 5 sets when it comes to JRPGs and what makes a JRPG good, at least when we're talking about with battle stuff. I mean, other JRPGs set things up to where you have just like one, maybe two characters who have just a super OP attack, and that's literally all you do over and over and over again. Now, I know sometimes P5 and some other Persona games do this sometimes. I mean, P5 does have a couple. I mean, I use Shining Arrows, I think, towards the end of the game, but I think most, JRPGs sometimes have it to where, you have like your really strong Pokemon at the very beginning, or usually your starter, and people just use your starter the entire time and use the one or two OP skills to just sort of carpet bomb everything in the way, and I don't think that's fun. I don't think strategically that's what a JRPG should do. You should be able to sort of work around different stuff, and I think that's what P5 does, and I really enjoy that. I mean, there is the all-out attack, which I guess is kind of the super OP move for P5. I mean, it is cool, though, to try and figure out how to hit different enemies, because you don't just get the all-out attack. You have to figure out what certain things they're weak to, knock them all down, finish and do the ultimate, all-out attack, which I think that's a little bit more engaging, and it has a good pace when it also comes to that, because you have to learn actually what the enemies are doing, and it's a little more strategic that way, and I think that's good for JRPGs. Make the harder super OP thing a little bit harder to get. You have to learn about the game. You can't just spam it over and over and over again. You have to actually figure out what's, the weaknesses of the enemies, and then you can have your super OP move. So it takes a little bit more brain power, I think, to get the super, OP all-out attack move instead of just having it spammed over and over again because it's just a regular, basic skill or something like that, like certain JRPGs will have. Now, I want to preface, not every single JRPG is like that, but there's certain things that I think P5 does when it comes to the battle system that makes it feel more engaging than others. Okay, so let's move past the battle gameplay and talk a little bit more about how it's changed overworld gameplay and help other aspects of the game, and it shows how good the overworld is. So I've played other games that have like day and night cycles, and of course even like P4 and some of the other Persona games, they also have a day and night cycle. I mean, that's a pretty big thing when it comes to Persona games in general, but at least towards the end of P4 you end up really not having a whole lot to do, and sometimes even during like pretty much the middle, because you've done all the stuff you can do. I mean, you've done all of your confidants, you've done all of your bonds, or whatever I guess you could say, confidants, bonds, you've done all the jobs, you have nothing else left to do in P4 like halfway through the night cycle, so the nighttime stuff really doesn't have a whole lot there. Well, P5 I think changes that up and does a little bit better at that. I mean, obviously we know the whole cycle. I mean, during the day you have stuff that helps boost your combat, and also at night you can also boost up your leveling bonds, give you more power in battle, and opening up more areas that will help you in the future in different ways. But being able to buy stuff and also have gear as well is also another plus when it comes to the game. But of course this is the whole point over the overworld, and the thing is, everything you do in P5 somehow feels like it helps you in the end, and I think that's important. The worst thing that you could have in a game is have it being slow and have it being boring at times. Now, I know the overworld stuff is a bit slower at times, but you still feel involved, at least when it comes to the story, and you still have something to do. If you're not working on the story in the overworld, then you're doing something like, either buying new weapons or checking up on your bonds, increasing your own personal stats, fusing demons, stuff like that. There's always something extra that you can do during the day to help aid you and help make your team even better, and I think that's important. For JRPGs, sometimes you have certain areas, certain side quests that don't do a whole lot for you, or you have long traveling bits where there's not a whole lot you can do. I mean, the fast travel is also nice in P5. Fast travel, if that's not in the game nowadays, man, that sucks. That is really, really bad. Final Fantasy VII Remake, I am looking at you, my boy. No fast travel, which I guess the chocobos could do that, but you had to get them eventually later on in the game. You couldn't get them immediately, and there's also a long load screen and everything. It's not something that you could just pull up anywhere. If you're in the middle of a certain part in Final Fantasy VII and there's no chocobos near, you're just screwed. You have to get through it all, and it can be boring and long and take, half an hour or more to get through, and that really sucks. But P5, you can pull the phone up in the Overworld anywhere you want and go to somewhere else. And I think that's very, very important to have that. I mean, that's something that Persona 5 does that I think is a standard now that we should have in JRPGs. We should definitely have that. But other things like, you know, P5 having the jazz bar, which is pretty cool. I mean, even if you are done with all of your confidants and your stats are all maxed out, you can go to the jazz bar and unlock new abilities and power up different forms and stuff like that for your teammates. There's never, you know, you're not going to run out of stuff to do at night or during the day. I mean, you could do the jobs for money, but I kind of don't ever work the jobs when it comes to Persona. So no matter day or night, P5 lets you have something to aid your team in some ways, which, again, I think that's very important. Don't have downtime. Have something to always do in the games. That's very important. You're going to lose people when they feel like they're just wasting their time and not doing anything. So P5 does a very good job at making sure you have all that stuff. Now, I know eventually you can run out of certain things to do, but there's always still something there, which I think is important. Now, I think a mix of everything is actually what makes this game enjoyable. You know, the battle mechanics and the overworld mechanics sort of blending together, I think, makes the perfect harmony when it comes to a JRPG, and sometimes maybe even tricks some casual fans into not feeling like it's turn-based. Like, yeah, of course, it might not feel that way, but it is a turn-based game still, you know, but it sometimes, I think, tricks people into thinking that it's like that. And while the story does lack in some aspects for P5, maybe with the villains and the sort of back stories and stuff like that, but the game still keeps afloat with its great art design, aesthetics, fast and easy to use gameplay mechanics which you can master, which can help the even more hardcore challenges and the more hardcore fans and the Meg 10 fans who've played these games for a good little while. I mean, you can turn up the difficulty, you can have the Reaper, you can do side quest boss fights. If you have the Royal version of the game, there's plenty of extra fights you can do that feel very rewarding, and even DLC stuff if that's something that you wanted to dive into, you know. And the Overworld keeps you involved and always tries its best to not waste your time. Don't waste our time with these JRPGs, man. It technically gives you something to aid you in your journey. I mean, these elements is what it is, and that's what sets the bar for the community and the industry, and I think that is why P5 is compared so often. Now, I'm not justifying it and saying it needs to be compared to everything. I mean, SMT5 is a whole different breed of its own, so it doesn't necessarily need to be completely just compared to P5 all the time, but I kind of understand that because the many ways it is often different aspects of the game that make the, you know, game become better than most. When stuff always becomes carbon copy, you know, just over and over again, you sort of feel like, man, I kind of feel like I've already played this game before, you know? It's kind of rough playing brand new games and realizing they just sort of are the same thing as something else. That sucks. Overall though, P5 brings the innovation, and I think that's what we can really take away from this game. It helps those who are not really into JRPGs understand how to play one while at the same time not being slow and hard to play. You don't lose their attention, which is good. And at the same time giving a challenge to the hardcore players. I mean, I know that P5 has a reputation for being pretty easy, but I think that's just for the Meg 10 fans because they've already understand the gameplay mechanics and have already played, you know, a certain number of other Meg 10 games. So I guess you could just crank up the difficulty though if you needed to, but I do think there are a lot of things that you could get from this game other than just it needs to be hard, it needs to have a lot of boss fights. I mean, I think there's still other stuff, and I think in terms of the bar where JRPGs go, P5 is there. I mean, I'm not trying to say this game is perfect by any means. There could be more that they could do, harder challenges, maybe some more boss fights, some different gameplay modes. I know a lot of people don't like Merciless because Merciless isn't that hard. It just sort of changes, you know, the abilities basically. You know, fire moves do more damage to, you know, people who have ice or whatever. You know, it just changes that. It doesn't change the difficulty too much, but I don't think you can deny the impact though that this game has had and the innovation it has brought to JRPG fans, and also breaking into the casual fan base, which is important in some ways. I mean, it brings it into the mainstream for either good or worse, and I think it's made people open their eyes to JRPGs and at least give a turn-based one a try. And if they're afraid, you know, hopefully they're not anymore when they try playing P5, because I think it is very user-friendly. And there's more and more games that are trying to, you know, compete with P5 and be somewhat similar to certain aspects of P5, like Monarch and some of these other games that have been coming out. I mean, I don't want to compare it to SMT5 because I don't think it's completely different things, but there is an element or two that has transferred over to there, and I don't think that's because it's P5 versus SMT5. I think that's just because P5 has just been a JRPG in the whole, you know, game space. It's a JRPG that is there, that has set a certain bar for what a good JRPG is like, and I think SMT5 was like, well, we're going to adapt a couple of those things to our game so it also hits that bar in terms of a JRPG, not comparing P5 to SMT5. I mean, I kind of am, but just these certain aspects that it, you know, has to have, I think, to compete with that. But I still love SMT5. Still think it's a great game, and like I said, I'm not for one comparing it to that. I know people are gonna chew me out if I do that, but just a certain aspects of it. You can't deny that they're both JRPGs. I mean, they are. So let me know what P5 did differently for you. I'd really like to know what it got you to, you know, appreciate it as a JRPG. Is P5 the first game that you ever played that was like a turn-based JRPG? Did it ever do anything for you to make it click and be like, yo, JRPGs are fun because of P5 doing this certain thing? But I'm going to wrap this up, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. Remember to click the bell to know when I go live again and when I have a new video go up. That P25 anniversary is right around the corner, and hopefully we'll get that. I'll be sure to keep you up to date about that. It should be happening soon. Don't know exactly when, but hopefully very, very soon. And like the video if you could, subscribe for more content. And as always, guys, thank you all so much for watching.